People think the cruelest revenge is destroying someone's future. It isn't. The cruelest revenge is inviting them to watch yours. For 6 years, Omega Kieran Vale loved Alpha Adrian Cross. He worked double shifts while Adrian finished business school. He sold his late mother's jewelry to help fund Adrian's first logistics company. Every sacrifice was made quietly. No receipts, no complaints. Then, Adrian became successful. Soon afterward, a wealthy Omega named Lucius Sterling appeared. Beautiful, elegant, born into one of the city's richest families. 3 months later, Adrian ended everything. You deserve someone simpler. Kieran understood what Adrian really meant. Someone richer, someone more impressive. 8 months passed. Then, an expensive cream-colored envelope arrived. Adrian Cross and Lucius Sterling request the honor of your presence at their engagement gala. Kieran almost threw it away, until he noticed a handwritten sentence beneath the printed invitation. I hope you've learned your place. His fingers tightened around the card. He could stay home, pretend it never arrived, or he could prove that Adrian no longer controlled his life. On the night of the gala, Kieran walked into the glittering ballroom alone. Politicians, business executives, celebrities, even powerful mafia families filled the room. Adrian spotted him immediately. A slow smile spread across his face. Ladies and gentlemen, he raised his champagne glass. I'd like everyone to meet the man who honestly believed I'd spend my life with him. Laughter echoed across the ballroom. Lucius slipped an arm around Adrian's waist. Some people mistake kindness for love. Every eye turned toward Kieran. He stood alone beneath the crystal chandeliers, or so everyone believed, because across the ballroom, one silent alpha had been watching him from the moment he walked through the doors. And unlike everyone else, he wasn't smiling. The alpha standing near the back of the ballroom never laughed. His name was Cassian Moretti, the city's most feared mafia boss. He had attended only because his investment group sponsored the gala. Business interested him. Public drama did not. Yet his eyes never left Kieran. His consigliere noticed. Boss, do you know him? Cassian shook his head. No. Then why are you watching him? Cassian looked toward the lonely Omega standing beneath hundreds of curious eyes. I know that expression. What expression? The one people wear after they've spent years helping someone else's dream come true. Across the room, Adrian continued entertaining his guests. Believe me, he joked. Breaking up was the best business decision I ever made. More laughter followed. Someone whispered that Adrian had been lucky to upgrade. Another mocked the tiny apartment where he and Kieran once lived. Kieran could have answered. He could have reminded everyone who paid Adrian's tuition, who worked overtime, who sacrificed everything. Instead, he smiled politely. Adrian worked very hard. Cassian frowned. Even now, the Omega, being humiliated, refused to humiliate the man who had hurt him. That kind of loyalty was rare, and people like Adrian rarely deserved it. Cassian placed his untouched champagne glass onto a passing tray. His consigliere noticed immediately. Boss? Cassian had already started walking. Not toward Adrian, toward Kieran. At the front of the ballroom, Adrian raised another glass. I have one last surprise for everyone. The lights dimmed. A massive screen behind the stage flickered to life. Kieran's heart sank. He recognized the first photograph before anyone else did. Their old apartment, their old life, their private memories, displayed before hundreds of strangers. And Adrian smiled, exactly as he'd planned. The first photograph filled the screen. A tiny apartment, second-hand furniture, Kieran asleep on the couch, while Adrian worked beside him. The second appeared. Kieran wearing a supermarket uniform after another overnight shift. Then another. Boxes stacked in a cramped living room, a cheap birthday cake. Years of private memories became entertainment. Guests laughed quietly. Adrian lifted his champagne glass. Success changes your standards. He slipped an arm around Lucius. I've upgraded. Silence followed. Then another voice spoke. No. Every head turned. Cassian Moretti walked calmly across the ballroom. No one dared stop him. He stopped directly in front of Kieran. For a moment, neither man spoke. Cassian gently lifted Kieran's chin. Look at me. Kieran did. Instead of pity, he saw respect. Cassian leaned forward and kissed him. Not passionately, not possessively, just long enough for the room to understand. When he stepped back, the ballroom remained completely silent. Cassian turned toward Adrian. The only person displaying poor taste tonight is the man who mistook loyalty for something disposable. No one laughed this time. Reporters hurried toward the stage. Camera flashes exploded across the ballroom. Guests whispered in disbelief. Lucius slowly lowered his hand from Adrian's arm. Adrian's confident smile disappeared. You. Cassian didn't let him finish. If someone spends years helping you become successful, you honor them. You don't use them as the evening's entertainment. Kieran stood speechless. His first instinct was to apologize. Instead, Cassian quietly asked, "Are you all right?" No one had asked him that all night. Kieran nodded, though tears burned behind his eyes. Across the ballroom, phones continued recording. By morning, every headline would forget Adrian's engagement. They would remember only one moment. The night the Mafia boss kissed the Omega, everyone else tried to shame. The next morning, every news channel replayed the kiss. Mafia boss interrupts engagement gala. Cassian Moretti publicly defends humiliated Omega. Kieran turned off the television. A knock came at his apartment door. Cassian stood outside, alone. No bodyguards? They're downstairs. Kieran stepped aside. I suppose that counts. Cassian smiled faintly. I owe you an explanation. He placed an old hospital bracelet on the table. Do you remember 3 years ago? A car accident outside your apartment. Kieran frowned. There were dozens of people standing around, but only one climbed through broken glass. The memory returned. A young Omega trapped inside an overturned car. Smoke, blood, people recording with their phones instead of helping. I donated blood, Kieran whispered, and stayed until the ambulance left. Cassian nodded. Then you disappeared before anyone learned your name. Kieran shrugged. He needed help. That Omega was my younger brother. Silence filled the room. I searched for the person who saved him for 3 years. Cassian looked directly at Kieran. I only discovered your identity last month. Kieran stared in disbelief. So, you went to Adrian's engagement because of me? I intended to thank you. His expression darkened. Instead, I watched someone try to destroy your dignity. Kieran lowered his eyes. The kiss wasn't planned. No, Cassian answered honestly. It was instinct. I refused to let kindness become entertainment. For the first time since the gala, Kieran smiled. A real one. Not the practiced smile he wore to survive disappointment. Before either man could speak again, Cassian's phone vibrated. His consigliere's voice came through immediately. Boss, federal investigators just entered Adrian Cross's headquarters. Cassian frowned. What happened? They're investigating financial fraud. Neither man realized. The engagement gala was only the beginning of Adrian Cross's downfall. 3 days later, Kieran received an unexpected message. Lucius Sterling wants to meet. He almost deleted it. Instead, curiosity won. Lucius arrived alone. No designer suit. No arrogant smile. Only exhaustion. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Kieran folded his arms. For replacing me? For believing Adrian. Lucius slid a folder across the table. I found these while preparing our investment documents. Inside were software patents. Every one carried Adrian's name. Kieran's breathing caught. I wrote this program. I know. Lucius nodded. I found your original files with creation dates. Adrian registered everything as his own. Kieran stared at the pages. The logistics system he'd spent 2 years building. The one Adrian called their future had never legally belonged to him. "There's more," Lucius admitted. "My family's investment was never about love." He gave a bitter laugh. "Adrian proposed 2 weeks after learning my father could finance his expansion." Kieran looked up. "You didn't steal my life." Lucius shook his head. "I inherited the same manipulation." For the first time, Kieran saw not a rival, but another Omega who had been valued for what he could provide, not who he was. Lucius met his eyes. "Will you help me expose him?" Kieran thought about the gala, the lies, the stolen work. Then he slowly nodded. "Yes." That afternoon, they walked together into the offices of federal investigators. They carried financial records, patent documents, emails, enough evidence to begin unraveling Adrian's empire. As the investigators accepted the files, one agent looked up. "This is going to destroy him," Kieran quietly answered. "No. He destroyed himself the moment he believed honesty was something he could replace." The investigation moved quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. Adrian had stolen Kieran's software, hidden company income, committed tax fraud, misled investors. Within days, the board suspended him as chief executive. The stock offering was canceled. His largest investors withdrew. The media that once praised him now questioned everything he had built. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around Adrian. "Did you steal your former partner's work? Did you deceive your investors?" Adrian ignored them all. His eyes searched until they found Kieran. He hurried over. "I made mistakes." Kieran remained silent. "I was under pressure. Still nothing. I can fix this." Kieran finally spoke. "No." Adrian's face tightened. "You don't understand. I do." Kieran looked at the man he had once imagined growing old beside. "You didn't lose me today." Adrian frowned. "You lost me the day you decided success mattered more than loyalty." For the first time, Adrian had no answer. Lucius quietly stepped beside Kieran, not to provoke Adrian, to support him. Then federal agents approached. "Mr. Cross, we have additional questions regarding your financial records." Adrian looked at Kieran one last time. Regret filled his eyes. But regret arrived years too late. As the agents escorted Adrian away, Cassian walked over carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Kieran. "No celebration?" Cassian smiled. "I wasn't inviting you to celebrate." He nodded toward a nearby cafe. "I was hoping you'd have coffee with me. Not a business meeting, not a favor, not another rescue, just coffee." Kieran looked at the quiet alpha standing beside him. Then, for the first time in a long while, he smiled without forcing it. "I'd like that." And together, they walked away, leaving Adrian to face the consequences of the life he had chosen. Coffee turned into conversation. Conversation became evening walks, then dinners. Weeks passed without Cassian asking Kieran to be anything other than himself. He never arrived with expensive gifts, never used his influence to impress him. He simply listened. One rainy afternoon, they wandered through a small bookstore. Kieran paused beside a shelf of photography books. "I used to love these." "What stopped you?" "Life." Cassian quietly bought the book. When Kieran frowned, Cassian handed it back. "It's not a gift." "What is it?" "A loan." Kieran laughed. "So I have to return it." "I was hoping you'd return it over coffee." For the first time in years, laughter came easily. There were no games, no mixed signals, no wondering whether he was enough. One evening, while watching the city lights from a riverside bench, Cassian broke the comfortable silence. "I need to tell you something." Kieran looked at him. "I don't want to spend the rest of my life being the man who rescued you." "You don't?" Cassian shook his head. "I'd rather become the man who gets to know you. No dramatic confession, no promises, just honesty." Kieran felt warmth spread through his chest. It was strange. Adrian had spent years making him question his worth. Cassian had never asked him to prove it once. As they stood to leave, Cassian hesitated. There's a charity fundraiser next week. Where? Cassian smiled softly. The same ballroom. Kieran blinked. The engagement gala? It isn't that anymore. He held the door open. I'd like you to see what it has become. For the first time, returning didn't fill Kieran with fear. It filled him with curiosity. The ballroom looked nothing like Kieran remembered. The stage where Adrian had mocked him now displayed photographs of people rebuilding their lives after emotional and financial abuse. The evening wasn't about wealth. It was about healing. Kieran had been invited as the guest speaker. Standing at the podium, he looked across the room. I used to believe surviving humiliation meant making the people who hurt you regret it. He smiled gently. I was wrong. The greatest victory is building a life where their approval no longer matters. The audience rose in applause. When the event ended, Cassian found Kieran standing beneath the same crystal chandelier where they'd first met. You're smiling, Cassian said. I never thought I would in this room. You earned it. Cassian reached for Kieran's hand, but stopped just short of touching him. May I kiss you? Kieran laughed softly. You asked. I always will. Kieran closed the distance himself. Their kiss was slow, gentle. No cameras. No humiliation. No need to prove anything to anyone. When they parted, the audience quietly applauded, not because a mafia boss had kissed someone, but because they had witnessed two people choosing each other with honesty and respect. Kieran rested his forehead against Cassian's. This one feels different. Cassian smiled. Because this one belongs to us. Across the ballroom, a photographer captured the moment. Years later, that photograph would become famous. Most people believed it marked the beginning of their love story. They were wrong. It simply celebrated something that had already grown. One conversation, one act of kindness, and one respectful choice at a time. Adrian lost everything. His company collapsed. The stolen patents were returned to Kieran. Investors walked away. The same society that once applauded Adrian now remembered him as the man who traded loyalty for ambition. Lucius never celebrated his downfall. Instead, he established free legal and financial counseling for partners escaping controlling relationships. Kieran did the same. Using the recovered patents and compensation, he founded a non-profit that helped victims reclaim stolen businesses, creative work, and financial independence. Cassian quietly funded every expansion, but he refused to put the Moretti name on any building. Only one name appeared above each entrance: Kieran Vale Center. When reporters asked why, Cassian answered simply, because kindness deserves to be remembered. Years later, people still talked about the night Cassian Moretti crossed a ballroom and kissed a humiliated Omega before the entire city. Most believed that was where their love story began. It wasn't. The real beginning happened years earlier, when a struggling Omega climbed through broken glass to save an unconscious stranger without asking for recognition. Kindness had simply found its way home. One evening, Kieran looked at Cassian and smiled. You know, I thought Adrian replacing me was the end of my story. Cassian gently squeezed his hand. No. It was the moment your real life finally had room to begin. Kieran looked around the charity gala, filled with people rebuilding their futures. He realized Adrian had never taken his worth, only his confidence, and confidence could be rebuilt. The city no longer remembered Kieran as the Omega who'd been discarded. They remembered him as the man an entire ballroom eventually stood to applaud. Because the greatest revenge was never making his ex jealous. It was finding someone who respected him so completely that everyone else finally learned to do the same.